Hello, everyone. It's great to be back with my second day in a row. For those of you who don't know me, my name is itWhy. I'm head of capability development here at Cosmic Centaurs. And if you are new to us, we are an organizational and leadership development firm. We partner with leaders and teams to help them make better decisions about work and the workplace and to affect sustainable impact. We are running this webinar series as part of our capability development service line, and I'm excited for our third conversation today because I get to flip the mic on our very own Chief Centaur, Marilyn. You know, Marilyn doesn't get introduced often up here because she's usually introducing a guest, so I have the privilege of introducing her today. So, Marilyn, I'm going to introduce you. Marilyn is our CEO and founder, and she works at the intersection of strategy, leadership, and organizational design. For more than 15 years, she's partnered with C-suite teams across the region and beyond, helping them align around strategy, leading transformation, and building organizations that thrive. Her background, in fact, is nonlinear, as are many centaurs, and it spans corporate leadership, where she was Chief Marketing Officer at Ahmad, as well as CEO of Dubai Opera. And before that, she had a career in tech, building and scaling digital ventures. Today's conversation is really exciting because it's all about one of Marilyn's latest brainchild inventions. And it's part of her work directly with C-suite leaders who are driving growth, transformation, and change all around the region. She's designed and delivered more than hundreds of executive learning programs and strategic offsites, which gives her a very, very strong position on how leadership credibility is built and sustained in this market. When she speaks about leadership presence and visibility, she does it from both sides of the conversation. I've seen it happen in action where she goes from being the executive who holds the mic to really immediately switching to the audience who's attuned and what's listening. And so as a trusted advisor, she brings that depth of perspective. And today we're talking about how we're helping leaders step into a more visible role with confidence and strategic intent. So Marilyn, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for the intro. You're right. I haven't been introduced in a really long time. So that was really interesting experience for me.
Now you know what it feels like on the other side.
Exactly.
So today's topic is one I'm also very excited about. Obviously, calling myself Centaur number one and being here since the early days of Cosmic, we've been talking about the importance of having a perspective, having a brand, and putting yourself out there. It started with webinars with students back in the day on the importance of personal branding in the world of remote work, to co-designing experiences that have taken us on global stages, such as the Miss Global Forum, and even just the day-to-day of working with executives and helping them think about what they're going to say in that town hall or in the board meeting, running them through those executive presentations. We've really made it a point to highlight the power of presence in the way in which we work and develop leaders since day one, honestly. So today's topic has really helped us, it's rooted actually just in what we've been building from the very beginning, from boardrooms to team meetings to keynote stages. We really, really firmly believe that every opportunity is one where you can share your perspective and tell a story. And that's what drives influence. And that's what leaders really have the responsibility to do. The data also tells us that this is a very much high need for CEOs and business leaders alike. For example, the Trust Barometer by Edelman tells us that 60% of people find a visibly engaged CEO more trusted than a silent one. And around 77% of buyers are influenced based on a leader's reputation. And so the business case is there. And yet, what gets in the way, what prevents leaders from taking center stage is they're very small things. And today we want to unpack what those are. I know that public speaking is one of the highest ranked fears. There's actually a term for it. If you know us centaurs, we love a good definition, and the term is glossophobia. It's among the top global fears. And in our region, especially in our cultures, we do still feel a tension around that visibility. We have cultures rooted in humility and discretion and letting the work speak for itself. And so many years that's probably worked, and today that's just not the case anymore. So I know, Marilyn, you see this in your day-to-day and your work with leaders, accomplished executives who have the most remarkable reputations internally, and yet they're hesitant to getting on stage, putting their thought leadership out there. We want to talk today a little bit about why it matters more than ever to take that leap and really build your leadership voice, and what it takes also to do that in an effective way, in a way that feels true to you, in a way that is structured, and to talk about our new program, the Compelling Communicator. So if you have any questions, if you're tuning in from, please dive in. Drop your questions in the chat. I'm sure between myself and Marilyn, we'll pick them up. Marilyn, are you ready to take center stage?
Always should be my answer.
Amazing. So, maybe let's talk about the region, the context. I kind of briefly mentioned it, but what do you see about what from leaders? What's getting in the way from public speaking? Why does it feel uncomfortable for us in the region? Maybe let's start there today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, you spoke about some of the universal reasons why many of us all around the world shy away from public speaking. You mentioned glossophobia. We always tell people when we teach public speaking or presence that the way that our brain translates having all these eyes staring at us is actually, it treats it as if it was a source of danger. So there's a lot of kind of intrinsic human things that place a barrier between us and public speaking. But if we were to focus on the specificities of this part of the world, I think we'd have to start with the cultural aspect. We are in a culture where self-promotion is not well received. And oftentimes, we're a very community-oriented society, so we do care about what other people think about us, even if we want to pretend that we don't. And also, we are a very high context culture, which means that we're not really good at sound bites because we don't think in low context terms, right? And so we don't have, Americans can take the same concept and talk about it for 15 years and say the same thing and deliver the same soundbite. And I'm not saying that's a mark of intelligence. I mean, I wish I could be like that. I just say that in our cultures, doing that is not rewarded because that's not how we communicate. So I think there's a lot of, cultural elements to why leaders here don't really step onto the stage. And I think we also often are made to believe that our work should speak for itself. I certainly used to be one of those people. And so we don't want to promote it because we think it is good enough and people should recognize us for it. And we often believe that humility is a virtue and therefore visibility is an opposition, which makes it a vice. And today I was scrolling to the feed, and Reem Al-Houni, who is another leader that does beautiful work in terms of helping others find their voice and their visibility. She has a community called Mission Visible. Posted something that I also echo so much, which is that at the leadership level, visibility is not ego, it's leadership. So beautiful. First, I think that's one level of kind of the cultural aspect. I also think there's a structural gap, if I may. Like, I think that, if we take the GCC as an example, we are in emerging economies. The UAE as a whole is, younger than my mother, as I like to say. Saudis only really opened up and started to develop and emerge in the last couple of decades. And so we also don't have a tradition of this. The media here is not positioned in, at least in Lebanon, for example, I can tell you, like, the media is not there to scrutinize. It's there to carry the voices of leaders, including political ones. And so the media doesn't challenge, doesn't pressure. And so we don't really have a structural environment where we had to do that as leaders. We have to be in front of a journalist who's asking us really tough questions. Certainly not in the private sector, maybe more so in the government sector. And also the speaking circuit isn't there. Again, like, if you think of the big conferences in Saudi, most of them are like not 10 years old. In a lot of cases, you have to pay to speak. So there also isn't, let's say, a hunting ground where if you're a really great speaker, you get rewarded for it. So there's quite a lot of the ecosystem around public presence that is underdeveloped, whether it's the media, whether it's the speaking circuits, the speaking agencies, even the services provided. A lot of it is pure media training. There's not a lot in terms of that is very visible in terms of executive presence and so on. And so I really think that's structural. And because the GCC is emerging, I think it's also why, we also started feeling like we had a responsibility. We are now a region that is globally visible from an economic perspective. A lot is happening here. And we really need the leadership voices to represent our story. And that's why we want to go from, all right, here's why we're not very good at this in this region, to what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for structuring that so clearly. I actually really agree. I think if I think back to my PR days working with leaders, their media training was just on how do we just answer these questions that we don't really want to answer, right? And that's where it really left. But you named something that I really see was so relevant then, and I wish I knew it then. But you named a polarity, right? Humility and visibility. They come into opposition, right? It feels like a paradox. How do you see it from your perspective? What does that look like? What is that tension? What can we see if we're observing it?
Yeah, look, I mean, as I said earlier, we grow up in cultures where modesty, humility, collective achievement, so we don't celebrate the individual as much as we celebrate the collective. All of that means that public presence can feel uncomfortable to the point of sometimes being criticized by our environment, or we assume that they will. I'm not sure that the environment would do that. I'm just saying, like, we assume that people are going to punish us for our desire to have visibility. And so we believe that the virtue on the other side is a virtue of humility, of letting our work speak for itself, of, striving, but not talking about what we do. And so I understand that. I grew up that way. I was like that for a really long time. I know that later we'll talk a little bit more about my personal story. But I want to say that we're also a region that, for me, has one of the most inspiring economic agendas in the world right now, that is accomplishing truly beautiful things. The other day, I think it was like, I saw a quote where, I don't know if you know him, like Tyler Brûlé, the editor-in-chief of Monocle, who's kind of like a global tastemaker, made a comment, I think it was at WEF, about how this part of the world is teaching everybody else manners. And I was like, yeah, but also how sad that an American dude had to say this to legitimize it. But it's just like, we are one of the most interesting places in the world. And it's not new, by the way. We have been interesting for hundreds of years. We used to be the center of the economic world. And I just think that rather than have these narratives being shaped by others, I think we need to get over this idea that humility is a vice, and rather, again, as we said earlier, see it as leadership, see it as responsibility, see it as the fact that, you and I do this all the time. I do this when I talk to leaders. I'm like, name 3 leaders who you think are really great from the region at their public brand. And most people just can't. And it's sad, because, like, if you're a journalist in the US and you want to write a story about Saudi Arabia or the UAE, who are you quoting? You can't find people, right? Like, there's only so many times we can quote the 3 guys or girls that are visible here. And so I really think that we need to start seeing it. And I think that sits well with our collective view, that it is our responsibility, it is our legacy, it is our duty. It's not about self-promotion. It's about telling the narrative of the people who work side by side with us and who deliver value and who are changing the world. And if we are not the ones to raise their voices, then someone who is not from here will do that. And that would be a real shame.
Yeah. Actually, what you're saying really reminds me that so many of our cultures are actually rooted in storytelling. So many of like this idea of a hakawati, or sitting around a fire, majlis, a diwan, like, actually, this is really how our societies emerged and how they kind of came to be, and how we know so much about our heritage and how deep that is. And so in this new era of technology, it just seems like, yeah, well, like, thought leadership and putting yourself out there is one continuation of that. And it's one way to keep that legacy going. And perhaps then it's almost you could view it as a duty to keep that part of our heritage alive, right? To say that if I'm going to come here and inspire future generations, I'm only doing what others before me did. Instead of a scroll and papyrus, now we have LinkedIn and stages and conferences.
I love that. And I also, you're now making me think of, I think it was the video that we filmed for our 4-year anniversary, maybe, where I was embodying like a leader and sitting around a fire camp and telling a story. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. Like, storytelling is such a strong element of our tradition, being a hakawati. Like, I think a lot of unblocking leaders in the region is shifting their mindset and their understanding of why they should do it. And also telling them that, okay, you are not here to promote yourself. You're here to tell the story of others and to keep it alive as a legacy for future generations to learn from. And you just gave us a really beautiful analogy that I'm going to steal and reuse next time.
Please do. Please do. I'd love for you to tell us, like, how did you overcome that? Because I know you said you grew up in this also, let the work speak for itself. And Nadine in the comments is saying, how do we rethink that mindset? I'd love for you to, share your own journey. Like, how did you find your voice and build your presence?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll definitely say that I've always liked talking. so I did have some things there that were always present for me, but I used to use my public quote unquote voice, if we want to call it that, mostly in the context of teaching or learning. So I was an instructor at university for a really long time. I loved speaking at conferences because I loved sharing what I had learned. Actually, it was always about the content before it was about me. Actually, I didn't talk about myself all that much. It was very content oriented. And then when my career kind of developed and I became the CEO of the opera and the CMO of Ahmad, and a woman doing these jobs, especially CEO of the opera, like, it was a very compelling story to tell. And I got contacted by a lot of journalists to like do a feature and so on. And my answers within seconds to all of them were like, no, thank you. My work will speak for itself, like literally what Nadine just said. And so it wasn't, so I'm not one of those people who's afraid of public speaking. So that wasn't my barrier. It was really that I didn't want to be seen as leveraging my positions to, promote my image or aggrandize myself. So definitely I felt a lot of the things that other leaders do. And then when I started Cosmic Centaurs, so this was the beginning of the pandemic, of course, I started this company. I didn't come from consulting. I didn't have a way to generate pipeline from like, oh, I used to work at McKinsey and now I left, but my old McKinsey buddies still send me some work. Like, I didn't have that. I had to do everything from scratch. And the second I got a contract, I hired you. And I remember you said, so what do you want me to do here? And I was like, I don't know what we sell, but I want the entire world to know what we can help them with. I remember that moment. And it also was the moment where I realized that, and you helped me a lot with that too, that I couldn't punish this company and its future employees and the impact that it could have by actually being selfish. So it was the other way around. I felt like my ego was going to create hurdles and barriers for this organization, whereas the moral thing to do was to get over myself and do the work of becoming publicly present, of being a thought leader, of positioning the company and what we do, and of bringing business. And so it really started with a very tangible purpose. And I think that over time, obviously my public presence serves our business, but today I'm not the only one with public presence in the company. You, Marie, and all of our team members actually, we've been hammering this. We lead boot camps every year to help our consultants develop their personal brand and be present in LinkedIn and speak at events and whatever it is. So I don't feel like the existence of the company relies on me posting on LinkedIn or speaking at a conference anymore, but instead, this has been replaced by a desire to serve. And actually, from our first year, one of the numbers that we track is how many people's lives we've impacted. And some of it, yes, comes from our paid work, but a lot of it comes from the webinars, the conference, the things we write and publish, all the knowledge that we put out there in the world. And I really now have a mission, which is, we know a lot of things, we learn a lot, we experience a lot, we have a lot of wisdom in this team. And so sharing that with the world has become a duty to those who can't or won't be paying for our services, but would still really grow as leaders and as individuals if they were inspired by how we approach things. And so I get my biggest reward is someone will see me and they'll say, 2 months ago you posted about this, and sometimes they won't even like the post. That's always what's funny. I'm like, I didn't remember seeing your name, and that really helped me because this happened with someone that reports to me, or I managed a stakeholder better, or I led this thing better, and now I have like a bigger purpose to my public presence, and particularly raising the voice of leaders from this region. That's really now been, and we'll talk a little bit about the MGF paper later, and maybe in a week or so, I'll have a bigger announcement towards that. But I've made it my mission to elevate the voices of leaders from this region as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's starting with a team. We've all seen just how much like that encouragement, that mindset has helped all of us to do it. And we've then seen the ripple effect too. I mean, just the other day I got a phone call from, someone I know kind of at a high level. She's like, I have a problem and I think you're really the right person to help me fix it. I was like, shoot, what do you want to hear? And she had a really simple managing up dilemma that we see a lot. And I was able to work her through it. And I was like, what prompted you to ask me? She was like, I don't know, I see you posting on LinkedIn about these things, right? And
That's
so
so
to say
beautiful.
that, it's an example of how just, again, no likes, no clear, like wasn't a fan of all the content, but just saw it and understood that it could be of help and of service. And so we definitely have seen that. But I'd love for you to now talk about beyond us and our team, like what becomes possible when a leader does develop their public presence? Like how does shaping their leadership voice create that ripple effect for them and their ecosystems?
Yeah. I mean, another thing that we often talk about with leaders when we're trying to push them towards that is that you got to see your leadership voice as an asset of the organization, right? Like if you want to look at it this way. And the first example you just gave us, like visibility improves trust. This person didn't know you, had no reason to trust you other than what they have seen you contribute publicly. And yet they trusted you with a problem that is very important to them.
Yeah.
And so that trust then creates a lot of positive effects. Like it shortens sales cycles and improves partnerships and increases the value of the firm. And trust is at the center of so much value being created, right? And if it could be that someone recommended us to someone else, and they go and they find us on LinkedIn and they see what we're talking about, and they like maybe watch us for a couple of weeks, and then they're like, oh no, these people really do care about this stuff. They really know their content. They're really thought leaders. And suddenly they'll pick up the phone and call us. Like the number of times where I've heard that story, right? If we want to take global data and we look at publicly traded companies, there's an estimation that the CEO's reputation will account for the variability in the market value by 45%. Like
Wow.
that's pretty insane, right? When you look at globally publicly traded companies. And like it's such a big part of the value of an organization. So that trust piece cannot be overstated. The other one is, of course, that, and if you take the GCC for context, earlier today we were having a conversation with a group of Saudi leaders about Gen Zs, right? And how like their approach to work is different and how they expect new things from us. And well, what actually helps strengthen your company's brand and people's loyalty to it? Leadership voice. People want to hear from their CEOs, from their leaders. It's very critical that people show up in times of difficulty. Oftentimes when things get difficult, we hear silence, we start making up gossip. Actually, people can really navigate through crisis in a positive way if their leader communicates and their leadership team communicates often. A great CEO reputation attracts new employees. Like 77% of people say that they're more likely to join a firm because of a CEO's good reputation, and 70% of employees are going to stay in that firm, be retained by that firm because of the CEO or the C-suite and how they communicate. So, the impact on bringing in talent. And earlier we spoke about sales, but I really think like for us, it's been as a cornerstone of how we generate value and are seen by our clients. I mean, I cannot imagine how we would do without it. I always think like, how do other firms do this? Because no one's as vocal as we are. But again, the data there is just so clear, right? Like 9 in 10 decision makers will be more receptive to me reaching out to sell them something if they already followed me and thought I had high quality leadership. 9 in 10. So why wouldn't you is the real question. And all of this compounds, like every speech, every post, every connection, that really generates opportunity. And because we've been doing it for 6 years, we really see it. Through the conference, through the LinkedIn stuff, through the public speaking, through the private speaking. We do a lot of executive master classes and keynotes for closed company events. Every time you contribute to a conversation, you're increasing your clout and you're increasing the value of your firm. So we really need to start thinking about our public images, brands, whatever we are comfortable calling them, our leadership stories. Different people might want to call it different things as an asset and start treating it that way.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that you called it an asset. I love that it reinforces trust, pipeline, employer value proposition. I mean, it's something we also, when we are explaining to our team, like why we invest in building a brand, even as a firm, like we know, we see it in the data. B2B professionals are way more likely to want to work somewhere where you feel like they have a perspective on, or they share their workplace, or they care. And I think brand investments, personal or organizational, can yield an ROI of around 300% in sales or in market share. Like these are just all of the data points that you really wonder. You're like, well, then what is getting in the way, right? Like what makes it so hard? Because the opportunity on the other side is really so clear. And so thank you for that. I think one thing I'd also love to kind of touch on and add to, you talked about this idea of controlling a narrative. And actually in our old PR days, we used to always say, like, if you don't own the narrative owns you, right? Like we wanted to be ahead of the news cycles. We wanted to be ahead of what people were saying about the executives we represented before they would do that. And we did so much back end work to be proactive about it, right? So that you weren't just reactionary. Because what actually, really ends up happening is your message gets diluted, and for so many reasons you become the agent, right? You're not the architect of your brand. To bring back our systems thinking tools, there's so much attention on the region, like you said.
Yeah.
People are talking about the region, but a lot of times when they're talking about the region, maybe they're not from it, right? And so the lens through which they're analyzing it from the outside, your brand, your company, your name, they're not seeing it from your perspective. They might not have your context or your values or your interests. And so it's so important now more than ever to own it rather than have the narrative control us, with so many eyes here on our leadership and on our work and what's coming out of it. We want to make sure that we are telling that story and it's not being told about us. So I really resonate with what you said. And I think it's so, the time is now really to get serious about it. And I'd love to ask you, we speak a lot about on the, on our programs around leaders in the region, and the importance of connecting it to something bigger, right? We work with it every day. We believe that we have a contribution to make. And I know about your exciting announcement. I won't ask you to tell all today, but I do want you to tell the story about what we spoke about at the Miss Global Forum around how leadership from this region has something to contribute. I think everyone in the audience would be really, really compelled by that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that, that architect, object, agent metaphor, in this particular case, we could say, like, you need to become the author, not just the subject, not just what people write about, but who decides what is being written and what is being said. And we really are an incredible region, right? We're really doing beautiful things across the board, whether it's in transforming our economies, going to Mars. People always forget, like, I'm like, the UAE went to Mars. And so we are the center of the world as far as I'm concerned. And, the hyper growth, the modernization, the emergence of so many things around us, I really think that our economic ambition is huge, but it has outpaced our narrative sovereignty, if we want to call it that, right? And so last year, we've really started researching, like, how do leaders talk about themselves in the region? And we really found, like, that there wasn't a lot of content out there. The first thing we do, because we're nerds, is we go to academia, and we were like, so how many papers have been written about how we lead here? And the numbers were horrible. I actually, like, just now when you were talking, I pulled out this slide. So just a couple of examples of data points that we found. So in 17 years, so from between 2000 and 2016, only 176 articles were published in global management journals that were focused on the Arab world. And to give you context, that means in 17 years, there was less than 2 articles per journal that were published on what is happening here, although some of the most interesting things in the world were happening here. Not only that, but 62 of those studies that were published were authored by scholars who were not in Arab institutions, and 43% didn't even have an Arab author associated with them.
Yeah.
Now, that is something I want to rebel against, right? Because I think that we should own the narrative of how our leadership stories are told. I'm being a little political here, but I've learned a lot, obviously, from global institutions. I'm an INSEAD alum, a proud one. A lot of the work that we do is based on frameworks developed in Harvard and in LBS and whatever. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we also have a lot to teach the rest of the world in the same breath as I'm saying we have a lot to learn from the rest of the world. And so when we found so little content, we rebelled against that. And we said, we're going to start helping people here raise their voices. And so one of the things that we were lucky to be able to do in November of last year is we were invited to the MISC Global Forum to co-create a session with Saudi youth, and we called it Leadership Made in Saudi. And we had 80 young students in their 20s, and we asked them, what do you think are the leadership traits that Saudi leaders have that the rest of the world can learn from, and what are the global problems that we're uniquely positioned to solve? And we published a white paper off the back of that, and it's really beautiful. We'll put the link here if people want to download it. And it was so heartwarming to see, at least maybe they're delusional, but to see how Saudi youth see their leaders, right? We spoke of long-term responsibility, of collective progress, of courage, of hospitality, of integrity. Like, there were so many beautiful leadership traits that, I mean, that are indigenous, that are from here, that are special here, that we care of, community concern. And so if we don't talk about these things publicly, we're just going to be interpreted by others. And I think that we have, again, a duty to be the soft power and to tell our stories. Like, I can name 20 American CEOs. I could name 50. Actually, if we play this game, I could probably name 100. But if I try to do this for a region, I probably can't get to 5. And so I really think that, call it a call to arms, if you will, but it's personal to me and it's political to me. And I think we really need to sharpen that tool and to go out there and tell our stories.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, just shout out to Hadil and Razan and the wider team and Zaina who put together that report. It's honestly we're so proud and excited about it because it is that first foray. And I've told everyone, I'm like, everybody, in your goals, you need to put leadership made in, enter country you're from. And you should champion that report because we really do want to scale this to be from the Arab world, from the MENA region. And I think it's so important, like you said, to really own that narrative. And you're right, it is being the author, not the architect in this case. You really want to tell your own story. It's so important. We've talked about leaders in the region. I'd love, like, let's name some. Who are the examples of those that you believe have a strong and respected public presence?
Okay, I'm going to name people that people can follow on LinkedIn, because I think there are others who have a really great kind of approach to storytelling and so on, but maybe they're not as visible on social media, let's say. The first one, I spoke about her earlier. I'll name her again, is Reem Al-Houni. You have to, if you care about this stuff, you have to follow her. Just like me, she has made it her mission to help people tell their stories. She's very focused on video as a medium, so she has a lot of great content around that. She's really focused on the media because she's a TV producer. She really will add a lot, but she's very good at telling her own story. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's not just that she's a subject matter expert. I think she's a great benchmark of how to be authentic and focused in how you show up publicly and tell a great story. So that would be one of mine. If I had to name people who are more kind of in the leadership of maybe governmental, semi-governmental, there are two that come to mind for me. One is in the UAE. His name is Rami Jallad. He's the CEO of Rakiz, which is the free zone of Ras Al Khaimah. And again, he's very focused, super clear on his messaging, but also very human, alternates between like things that very much relate to the announcements of the free zone and his own personal reflections as a leader, just like good quality as well. Like, I've never seen something he posted and not felt like I learned something. So I really love his approach. And another approach that I love is Omar Najjar, who's the deputy CEO of the MISC Foundation. I think what I love, he's not as consistent, but his posts are always questions. And what I love about that is that he's always like opening it up to the community to have a dialogue in DMs, so to speak, or in his comments section. And it always creates a really great conversation, a lot of good insights. So those are mine. What about you, Tala? Who would you name?
I have two vastly different ones. I think the first one who comes to mind is Fadi Ghandour. I think he was one of the pioneers in the region who really was comfortable with putting himself out there and in what he built in WAMDA. And, as the internet rose, so too did his public presence. And he was very comfortable switching mediums and telling his story there, which I think really stands out. And another trait that I think stands out about him is the diversity in what he's sharing content about. Like, it's rooted in his purpose and the missions that he supports. It's also always rooted, he has consistency in his content pillars, you could say. Like, he's talking about investments in the region, talking about enabling youth with tech. And so just that really stands out. Another newsletter that it's on LinkedIn that I really love. I met her through you. Rawan Bina from Shalhoub has a really beautiful.
I forget that one, of course.
Yeah, it's a very different, like you switch gears, but it's like every time I get the email that says like she's published a new version of the newsletter, I'm very excited about it, but I need to be in the right state of being. It's not in between. No, I like respect the newsletter. Like, I have tea and I sit and I read it quietly. I read it a few times over and over again. I'm not going to lie, but it's just to really absorb it. So, and I think she's just that breath of fresh air on a news feed, and talks a lot about like leadership in the coaching space and the capability development work. And so it's great. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, I love
we'll
it.
make sure the team drops all of these in the chat so everybody can follow along. Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to hear more and to tell more rather about the Compelling Communicator program. We've talked a lot about why, right? We've talked a lot about why we should be doing this, why we as leaders in the region have a duty to kind of refine our voice. I'd love for you to break down how. Like, we've designed this program based on the core foundations of a strong personal presence. Could you tell us about it and around how you structured this learning experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a little bit of the history of this program is that about 2 years ago or so, a friend of mine reached out and he's like, "Can you teach me to do what you're doing?" And I'm like, "What am I doing?" He's like, "Your public presence." And I hadn't really noticed, because it was just like I had to do it. And that started a chain. Like, then every few months I would have someone reach out to me and ask me to do that. And I kind of started doing this like informally, like as a friend. I started building like a workshop, and then I started testing my method, and then realized that it worked. And so I decided to make this more of a official offering because of something, we talked about earlier, which is that in the last 6 years of Cosmic Centaurs, I've met a lot of really incredible leaders, really incredible, who have a crazy story, who've done beautiful things, who have so much to teach the rest of the world. And, we have a conference, we have a podcast, like I'd be like, "So why don't you come talk about this on our podcast?" And the look of fear in their eyes, I'll never forget it. Leaders that are, by the way, great speakers, like, because I've heard them speak sometimes in their own companies and town halls. I'm like, you're good at this. They don't see it. Their answers would be like, "I've never agreed to a public interview. I've never done this. It's not my thing. I don't know how to talk on a podcast or in a conference. No." And I really want to combat that. So it really started there. And because of that, I started asking these people more questions and understanding what was their barrier. And we spoke a lot about the barriers earlier. And so I kind of designed the program. I'm a design thinker. So I went back and I'm like, okay, well, what is getting in the way of these people doing things? And it's not that at some point it's useful, but it's not that they don't have a framework for how to write their posts, or they don't know how to use LinkedIn, or they don't understand what is needed. It's that they don't have the ability to combat that resistance. And so actually that's where the program starts, which is we name the resistance and we state the purpose. Because just like me, like I was like, I can't punish this company. And then I said, oh, but there are people following me and they depend on me now. And then it's like, well, now my new purpose is elevating other leaders' voices. It is because I have that explicit purpose that I'm able to post every day on LinkedIn, which, by the way, is not always fun, and you're not always in the mood, and always, if every keynote that I'm invited to, I'm like, of course I will be there. And keynotes and presentations and conferences take a lot of prep. Like, it's often I'm like, oh, I wish I didn't have to spend every Sunday night writing my next keynote. So what really brings me that energy and helps to maintain my discipline is the fact of having named my purpose. And that's where the program starts. So we talk about why you want to do the things that you do, how you're going to keep yourself powered, because it is a difficult and energetically, demanding thing to do, to commit to having a public presence. So that's kind of the first foundation. And again, I'm a design thinker. So the next thing we do, and sometimes in parallel, is kind of think of like, who do you serve? And that's the question I ask. I don't say who's your audience. I say, who do you serve? Because again, in our region, seeing that public presence as an act of service, I think, is an essential way of overcoming your barrier. And so thinking like, okay, well, I serve established leaders, and I serve middle managers, and I serve young professionals, and I serve women who are founders, and I serve, and then to be clear on like, okay, well, what do you want to bring to these people? Because we always say like a good story sits at the intersection of what you want to say and what people want to hear. And so that's where the program begins. What do you want to say? And what are the people who you serve looking for? What do they need? What's going to make their day better? What's going to make them show up in better ways? And when you put those two things on top of each other, that's when it becomes so easy to say, great, then my content pillars are going to be, like Marilyn, my content pillars are going to be the power of human connection, the importance of discipline, what it feels like to be a mom and a founder and a whatever. And that's kind of how you decide what the structure, the underlying structure of your story is going to be. Because once you have that, posting is not hard, because you're like, okay, here are my pillars. I'm going to do one per day across each of these. What inspired me this week? What am I thinking about? What are the people who I serve currently worried about? All right, let's go. Right. The rest of it flows so easily. And then, of course, like I overestimate how easy it is to tell a story, because I think I've been actively building that skill since I was at school. Like, I've always loved theater and presenting and whatever. So of course, then I also teach these leaders, storytelling and facilitation and narrative building, and, all the things that they need that are like the more technical skills of public expression, writing well, et cetera, et cetera. But once you understand the why, the how becomes so much easier. And that's kind of how the program is structured.
Beautiful. Thank you. Maybe tell us who this is for. Who are the leaders that you have worked with so far? What's the typical profile? Just so those listening can get a sense if this is right for them, and how they should reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's different types of leaders that this is designed for. I'd say people who lead their own company, because I think that as a CEO, you have a duty towards your organization to be visible in that way. Leaders who are leading regional or global organizations from here, and who really want to start using their voice as a strategic asset, who really want to contribute value to the organization by elevating their capacity to tell the story of their company and of their nation, because I think that's a big angle for us in the region. And then, so entrepreneurs or founders, senior executives or C-suite leaders that really want to elevate their voice within the local context. And I've also actually done this quite a few times for leaders in global organizations, because in global organizations, the visibility that you need to master is not simply external, but also internal. Yes. And so there's also oftentimes the only people you need to impress are the other global, executives around you. Yeah. And so that's also been something that I've seen. I've had a few of my the people that I mentor in this program come from that category as well.
Beautiful. And actually, a question from the audience, they ask, is this something leaders can build alone, or does it require structured guidance and feedback? How did, maybe tell everybody how you built yours? What kind of support?
You can do it alone if you make it your job. You know what I mean? Like, I made it my job and you helped me.
Yeah.
the thing is, as always, like I always say, who hires coaches? Athletes. And so we're looking for leaders who really believe in this. And by the way, like this skill is not just for public speaking externally, it's also for internal. Like if you want to motivate your people, you have a transformation program. You have a new strategy and you have to campaign around it. Like there's a lot of this that goes into town halls and board meetings as well, not just into LinkedIn posts. LinkedIn posts are just the visible ones, so it's easy to point at those things. But actually, a lot of it is also internal to the organizations. And so, it's about using your voice in that space. And you helped me. And of course, people can do it on their own. I always say that, by the way, most of what we sell, someone could do on their own if they had the discipline and time. We're just here to help accelerate that process. We're also useful. I mean, I'm a CMO. You come from comms. We have a lot of also these what we've learned with our expertise over the years that we can contribute to this. So, do you need an expert to help you? Yes. Can you do it alone? Yeah. It's up to you whether you think that this is something that right now is pivotal and is essential to invest in, or whether you just want to develop that point alone. So yeah, I guess that's my quick answer to that. I see another great question by Hadil as well.
Yeah, she wants to know what makes this different from another public speaking program or training that somebody might be considering.
That's a good one. Actually, I have a sense of what the program looks like, but I never run it the same way twice. Nice. And that's why this program is not a cohort-based program, it's one-on-one. Because I actually don't think that different leaders need the same thing. I do think the conversation on purpose and who you serve always adds value at the beginning of it. But then the question of like, where does this go is different. And I found myself in some conversations where it was more of a leadership development discussion than it was a public speaking one. If your focus is internal visibility and your internal stakeholders, then a lot of it also comes from like, how do you lead? It's not just about how do you talk about what you lead. And so we've done everything from a brand key to a leadership development discussion to, I remember one global executive where I was teaching them about facilitation techniques, because it was more about how do I get the global X, Y, and Z to make a decision that is in my favor. We've had conversations with some leaders around how they want to change the world and what their impact is. So the idea there is really, it's very different. I don't think I've run the program the same way twice. It's very personalized, and also it's specific to the region. I'll also say it's coming from a practitioner. So I'm not like, it's not that I got trained in some public presence framework. So we're framework agnostic. We'll bring in everybody's best work. We're not selling one particular school, but also that I've done it. So, I mean, we always say we were managers before we were consultants. And in this case, I'll say I was a public speaker and am still before I thought to tell someone how to do it. And I think, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm somewhat successful at it. And so it's also this, if you want to have the perspective of another CEO who has done it, not just a trainer or someone from the media industry. That is also like why you would choose to sign up for this one versus others.
Beautiful. You are really good at it. Let's just say that. And I also want to add to that answer, because I think in the spirit of all that we do in capability development at Cosmic, like we really root it in someone, in a learner's context, in their world, whether it's a cohort and we design it based on that company's needs, or an individual. We do it because we know that that's what makes learning stick, right? I mean, there's a stat, like 65% of learners believe that their training is not connected to their context or goals. And so why would you learn something that you don't feel is relevant to you, right? And so this program is clearly designed like for depth and on a one-on-one approach. And I think that it's just so important for someone, especially as they're crafting their own narrative, to feel like that journey is theirs. Theirs to shape, theirs to own, and theirs to grapple with too, because it's not always a linear journey, right? Like it can feel uncomfortable. And so it's like you have a coach with you who's making sure that like.
And I think, like you said, like it's rooted in all of these things that we do on the training side and as consultants too. So this week I was kicking off this with a leader who signed up. And I was like, so I'd like to see samples of your past communications. If there are videos of you talking at a town hall, I'd like to see how you run meetings. And they looked at me and they were like, oh, really? I was like, no, I need all of this before we start, because that's the whole point, right? It's completely personalized. I get to know you. I want to see, it's not like, oh, here's my program, come, let's go through it as it is. And we redesigned the whole program together because actually their interest is a little bit different than the generic thing that you can download on our website. And so we really put in the work, to make sure that it feels personalized, like as if it was created just for you.
Beautiful. As all things cosmic, it feels just made for you.
That's right.
Amazing. I mean, I'm so sad we could talk about this for actually 6 more hours, but we do have to come to our last component around the rapid fire questions. And so the way that we, Marilyn, as you know, run these is you have to have a very short answer. And I'm going to start with the first one, which is, what's a misconception about public speaking in the region that we need to move past?
I mean, I'm going to go back to what I've said, what Reem said today. Visibility is not ego. Visibility is leadership. It's responsibility. It is legacy. It is community concern. If you've earned a seat to influence and you don't use it, then you are falling behind on your responsibility. You owe it to your people, your industry, and your country to use your voice.
Beautiful framing. I love it. Very powerful. The leadership quality that is most important in building your public presence is?
Honestly, discipline. This stuff is hard work. Like I sit every Sunday for an hour and a half and I brainstorm what I'm going to talk about and I write every post. This is on LinkedIn. Writing a keynote is at least a 10 to 12 hour investment, plus designing the slides, pitching for these things, like being present, talking about it all the time. That's why like knowing your purpose is so important, because this takes discipline, it takes energy, it takes commitment. And if you don't have those, then you will just not make it to the finish line.
Fair. The biggest mistake leaders make when trying to build visibility is?
Depth over consistency. So what I mean by that is, again, a lot of the people I know, they're like, but I don't have something really interesting to say. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Say it anyway. Because actually we know that people reward you showing up consistently over the, quality, the academic quality of what you say every time. In fact, people are more reactive and engage more with content that isn't so complex, by the way. But if you show up every quarter and say something brilliant, but then disappear for the rest of it, you are not winning this game. You're winning this game by showing up. You're winning this game by the way, repeating things, because just because you said it once in 2024 doesn't mean anybody remembers. And so that consistency is necessary. And without it, you cannot build that presence. It's about showing up all the time.
It's so true. And I mean, I just have to say this, like when I grapple with a LinkedIn post, I actually never end up posting it because I'm just like, you know what? I've gone way too deep on this and it's just not going to land. And in today's world, it's just, I'm really honest with myself. I'm like, I love this. I will put it in a folder called blog on my computer and that's it. And it's just, and then I'm like, I'm plagued by that for 4 days and I'm like, I must return with something great. But it's like, if I just posted like the team ritual that we ran 3 days ago, it would have been enough and I could have, and it takes less time. Like, I mean, Leia's asking how much time do you need to invest? And I see you schedule your posts, like ultimate hack, like just spend 45 minutes, schedule them. And
I mean, it's more than 45 minutes, Tala, even for me, but I do spend those. I think about every Sunday, I spend about an hour and a half. I also during the week will get these ideas and I make sure to like WhatsApp them to myself or save content on LinkedIn that I thought was really valuable so I can reshare it. Like it's always in the back of my mind of like, what is next week's thing? We also spend a lot of time, honestly, thinking about what is on leaders' minds right now. Because just because you think it's interesting doesn't mean it's relevant in this particular moment. So like if we take Ramadan, like a lot of our posts you're going to see that are going to be like, okay, it's a moment to slow down and rethink and set yourself up for success and have some intentionality and also take a break. Like you're allowed to do all of these things. So we will think about how to frame something because it's relevant to someone right now. So there's a lot of time that goes into it. And again, if you go on the public speaking circuit, or if you write op-eds, like I've also contributed quite a few op-eds, that takes, a few hours. I'm going to say at least 10 to 20 per. And in my case, I've also backed up my public presence with primary research. And so, like, the project with Connie was 3 years of work so that I could make some scientific claim over some of the things I say. And so it depends how deep you want to go, but yeah.
Yeah, fair. Our last rapid fire, well, I have two more. The penultimate one is, what is one thing you wish you knew earlier about building public presence?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say earlier versus before 6 years ago. It's something that I say to all of you now. I always say no one cares that you exist, because a lot of what stops us is we're writing something, and in our head we're like, Tala's going to say this, and Rhea's going to make fun of me, and Hadi is going to think that wasn't smart enough, or that my conclusion should have been my introduction. Like, we have all these inner voices around why what we just wrote or said or thought is dumb. And remembering that literally no one cares that you exist, and that they will forget your post within 7 seconds of reading it, is liberating, because then it's like, whatever,
Totally.
just going to go with it.
It's completely liberating. It just reminds you that, like, actually, like, just keep going at it, right? You're going to be fine. Someone might sing something, but don't pause for that. And
it's also like, you don't get good at something if you don't do it. So if you think you're not very good at posting on LinkedIn or writing a speech or giving a presentation, then do you think you're going to get better at it by procrastinating it for a quarter? No, you're going to get better by doing it, getting feedback, and getting better. That's how you do it.
My husband always says, when did it become uncool to try things? Like, you just got to keep trying. He's like, it's not uncool. Like, you got to keep going.
And I think it's, I don't know if it's Stephen Bartlett now, I'm confusing, or whether it's Shane Parrish, but one of them always says that, like, the only people who criticize are the people who are not trying, because the people who are trying know how hard it is. So someone successful, like, let's say I look at someone's post and I'm like, I will not criticize them. I might give them feedback, but I'll be like, great, keep doing it, because I know how hard it is. The only people who criticize you are the people who are not trying, and you don't really care about those people.
Absolutely. And if somebody wants to sign up to the Compelling Communicator, how should they do that?
They can reach out to me, but I also believe that the team has shared a link in the chat for you to express your interest. But you can also just ping me on LinkedIn, and I'll find some time for us to talk about it.
Amazing. Beautiful. Marilyn, thank you. I mean, this hour has flown by. Let's just say that. I love flipping the mic on you. It's always so much fun, but also there's so much to learn. And thanks for your time today and for grounding this conversation in something that you do day in, day out. And I think everybody, I can speak on behalf of the audience, learned so much. I also want to thank our attendees, for those who are tuning in and engaging. Thank you for your thoughtful questions, for your comments. We will be sharing the recording to this on our YouTube channel. It'll be uploaded on our website, downloaded as a podcast, and you can come back to this discussion or share it with a leader who you think is really on the verge of diving into shaping their leadership voice. If today's conversation resonated with you, like Marilyn said, please reach out to any of us. We'd love to have this conversation. And if you are not already following us on Cosmic Centaurs, please do. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram. Sign up to our newsletter on our website. All of those links are going to be dropped in the comments box. And with that, wishing you a wonderful, wonderful second day of Ramadan and the rest of the month, inshallah. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.